get here this morning, because it's just a beautiful day, but boy, we sure have missed some school. And we're going to try to stitch together some of the things that we were hoping to do the other 2 days of the week so that we can catch up a little bit, but we won't be able to do it all. What is it? Yes, dude. What is it? Well, that's a pretty good guess, because it actually is a goat. But it'd be hard to tell if that was a goat or a little sheep, unless you knew your animals pretty good. It's a pretty little animal. Hey, you want to pat that little animal, and you got close to it, and it didn't know who you were, it would probably be out of there so quick you'd never catch it. But they are very pretty little animals. Okay, now I got to move pretty quickly through this, so I won't be asking people to read necessarily. But I want you to see some outstanding things, and I've tried to put them bolded. Okay, so one of the things was about the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, is there was to be no leavened bread. Now I'm going to try to show you the difference between leavened and unleavened bread in just a few slides. But I want you to go back tonight and tell your mom and your dad the difference between leavened and unleavened bread. Okay, so you've got to follow this. And God said, there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee. You can't even have it with you. Your house is going to be emptied of it. Neither shall there be anything left of the flesh which you sacrifice the first day, remaining all night unto the morning. So you know what happens after you have a meal? Who cleans up? Probably mother. Okay? Sometimes maybe you have helped, but mother cleans up. Well, someone's got to clean up, because you wouldn't want to come out the next morning to see all the stuff still left on the table, especially the leftovers. You see, we naturally think we don't like leftovers. Naturally, we think that, I don't want to eat that again. We're certainly not sitting out at the table all night. But God doesn't want to see any leftovers either. It shall not remain all night until the morning. You had to burn what was left. That would be a little bit difficult to do, but that's what God required. Now, there was an allowance made for some about the Passover. Can anybody spot what the allowance was? Now, you've got to read it, because you can't spot it, I don't think, unless you know it. But there was something that you could do if you couldn't eat the Passover on the day it was supposed to be eaten. What could you do? Well, it's got to be this verse 11, and I bolded it for you. The difference between that verse and what normally would occur is that it was the wrong month. So a person isn't available to have the Passover on the first month, which we told you, and the Bible says it very clearly, it's got to be the first month. But God wanted everybody to eat the Passover. So he says, okay, if there's a reason, you're in a journey, and you can't eat the Passover because you're away, you can have it on the 14th day of the second month. And as long as you eat it with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs, you've got to do it the same way, but you can do it the second month. Now, that's quite an allowance. You're taking notes. You want to make sure you take that note. Now, this Passover was not something that you could just say, oh, I don't think I want to participate. Now, God says, if you don't participate in this Passover, the same soul shall be cut off. That means not. You either eat this Passover or you die. Now, we're going to look at the reason for that. If you don't want to partake of the Passover lamb, if you don't want anything to do with the Passover, then God says that I don't want you to live. So it's really important to know that God made that rule and that we had to keep it. Now, if you looked at leavened bread and unleavened bread, that's what they would look like. It would be quite different. This unleavened bread is very thin. It's like a wafer. You eat it, it all crumbles and cracks into little pieces. And the leavened bread it rises up. It's big. You get a big slice off it, and it's sometimes quite soft. And it doesn't crack up. It could be a bit crumbly. It just depends on how long it's been around. But there's a very big difference between unleavened and leavened bread. Now, I'm hoping some of you high schoolers will go pick this up in just a minute. Do you know, have you ever heard of yeast? Some of you went shopping with your mom and you know that your mom buys a little package of yeast. Well, that's what makes the difference between leavened and unleavened bread. She could buy it like a yeast cake. It would be a little thing that you'd find in the refrigerator, probably, of the store. And that looks like a little, it was wrapped up. You take the wrapping off it, and there's yeast in that. Yeast are like little microscopic animals that actually make the difference between leavened and unleavened bread. That's the way you normally get it. You go to the store and buy this dried yeast. Now, yeast is a fascinating little thing to study. And if you ever had a little time in science to go through something that would be fascinating, just study yeast. Because there's a third form. It can either be in a cake like that, where it's live. Cake is just flour that's had a little bit of yeast in it. And you take some of that, you mix it through your dough, and then the dough will rise. So you can always have that on hand. That would be very fast. But today, because people don't like doing that, you can just get some dried yeast. But it will operate just the same when it's put into the dough. Or there's wild yeast, just out there all over the place. Now, this is really significant. And we'll have to talk about that. But that's why this would make a wonderful little science project for people to study yeast. Active yeast, so you can't really see that, but that would look like very small bubbles coming up and breaking, and more bubbles coming up and breaking. So when yeast are active in the dough, you will see the dough is rising, and as long as it's not being baked, you will see that it could actually have that much gas being liberated that you would actually see these bubbles. Like these parts here would be the gas bubble that's being liberated at the time the yeast is active. Now this is where it gets into chemistry. That's why I say high schoolers could probably figure this out. Anybody taking chemistry? Yeah, there's a couple who are taking chemistry. Well, you need to be able to make some significance of this. That's a chemical equation, and you have to have the same number of molecules on one side of this, and the same number on the other side. If you count them up, you'll find they are equal. Well, this is what yeast eat. They eat sugar. And when they eat it, they change the sugar into ethanol. Ethanol is alcohol. That's what smells. You know how bread smells so nice when it's being cooked? Well, that's the ethanol being given off. That's what smells so nice. And carbon dioxide is what makes it rise, because that's a gas, but it just can't immediately get out of where it is, so it will form a bubble and rise to the top, and it causes the bread to rise. You see it in both cases, then you bake it. When you bake it, you put it to such a high temperature, all the yeast dies. So you don't have to worry about little yeast in your mouth running around, because they're not really doing very much at the time after it's baked. I won't want to read all that because it's a bit technical, but it does show you that if there is sugar coming from the corn or the wheat or the barley or the oats, whatever it is you have in your flour, there's sugar in there. Normally it's in a starch form, but there's enzymes that will break it down into sugar, and the yeast work on the sugar. And the yeast are really quite interesting little animals. Bible said, God said that no leaven is to be found in your house. There's something about leaven. God did not want to see that in your house at all. So that was a rule that had to be kept. Whosoever eateth that which is leavened, that soul will be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your habitations you shall eat unleavened bread. Now this was really restraining, wasn't it? Because people like to eat bread. You mean to say I can't eat any bread? I can only eat this unleavened, this like some people like unleavened bread, but some people would think that it's maybe better to have what rises up and smells so nice when it's being made. Well, it was needful to search one's house to make sure leaven could not be found during this time. Now, some of you could say, well, that's kind of an odd thing to say, that you couldn't find any leaven. Well, you just go where you keep it. That's not quite the case. Let's just look at this again. While remembering the great deliverance from Egypt, they were to focus on God's work. There was no base for any boasting on the part of those delivered, because boasting is like yeast giving off gas and bubbling up. That's what boasting is. It's boasting with pride. There's no pride to be displayed before our God. And it was needful to have any hope of conveying the holiness of Yahweh to the next generation. Now, I found this fascinating. This is a little bit of research. I didn't know this until I had done this research on leaven. But as I told you, leaven has a form that it's in the air, little spores that the leaven produces, or the spore that produces the ability to develop into those little microscopic creatures, which then can work on the sugar and make the alcohol and the gas, that's carbon dioxide. Now the Jewish people that still try to keep this have to make a difference between what is leaven and what is not leaven. So there's no leaven or leaven wouldn't work if it was dry oats or barley flour. But as soon as you moisten it, you're going to make bread out of it. If you left that on your table for 18 minutes by the Jewish ruling, it's now leavened. Well, there wasn't any leaven in it. Where did the leaven come from? It's in the air. It's all over the place. If you left something that leaven can work on, in 18 minutes, it would be leaven. So you didn't have to go to the store really and buy some. All you had to do was just leave some moist flour on your table, and the yeast would come from the air in the spore form and start leavening that bread. Now God knew this. God made these things so that we could talk about them. So if you think of leavening as something that God does not like, it's like the flesh which thinks of thoughts which God does not approve of. And once you start to make the correlations, it's really quite effective to see this. So if you're able to remove all the leaven from your life, in 18 minutes it would be back again. That is so interesting to follow. Like if we come here on Sunday morning and we try to follow everything that God says, and we partake of the bread and the wine, etc., we think we go away feeling much better. In 18 minutes, your mind's working away again, and you're going right back to the thoughts that are natural to the mind. Leaven teaches us that. No wonder God says, get the leaven out of your house. Because in the feasts of Passover and unleavened bread, He wants you to think about Him and His Word, not about all those thoughts which are natural to us. I think that's really quite an amazing thing. What an example of human desire. Now here's where it gets interesting, because some of you may have taken already in science somewhere the study of the work of Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur was the person who who thought up and realized that we need to pasteurize things. We need to kill little microscopic creatures that are in milk, for instance. That if we drank it unpasteurized, the chances are we would take some of those inside of us, and they may be harmful to us. But if you raise the temperature of the milk to a point where it kills those little microscopic creatures, then they won't harm you. That's the basis of pasteurization. Pasteurization because of Louis Pasteur. Now there's a very simple experiment he used to prove this. People used to think at one time that if you left rags in the corner, say in the rags, a little pile of rags in that corner, you just left them there. But one day people came in here and they saw a mouse ran out. And a mouse ran this way. And they say, the rags have turned into mice. You might think that's pretty foolish. How people believe that. They couldn't explain, and it would have taken not that much, I think, to conclude that wasn't true. But Louis Pasteur said, I'll prove to you where this comes from. So in the very top, you see these little flasks he made with a long neck on them. So he heated up that, and by heating it, he killed all the little microbes that were in it. And then he left it as it was, and the last one is weeks later. It was still just like it was originally. The second one down, he took the same kind of a flask, heated up the same liquid to kill all the little microbes in it, then he broke the top off. Well, you can see in 2 or 3 weeks later, there's something growing in that one. Where did these microbes come from? And then he says, all right, I will take this third one here, heat it up, kill all the microbes, and then I'll leave this in a way that air is possible to get into it. And found out that even if he didn't break the tube, if air could get into it, it would contaminate it. That's the basis on which he learned that these little microbes don't just come spontaneously. In other words, they just come out of nothing. They actually come through the air. So if you expose something that these little things can grow on, and you do through that experiment, you can prove that, yeah, you can, whether it is the microbes that we're talking about that produce the spores for yeast, or whether it's something else, anything that's coming through the air will do that. That's quite interesting. I think maybe one day you'll be able to go back through that. Now, how are we set for time? Where's Carlos? She hasn't said anything, so we don't have any reason yet to be concerned. Let's just go on a bit until we get the word, and we've got to go out there and see this little creature. Are they goats or are they lambs?
Lambs.
How would you know that's a lamb?
There's one that's white on it.
Oh, that could be true for goats or lambs if they have different colors. Yeah, it's possible to be spotted. Now, the only way you can really judge it is the tail's up. Lambs don't hold their tails up. Goats do. And it's something like a deer. You ever seen a white-tailed deer? When they run, their tail's up over the back, and you can tell what you're looking at. So there are a couple of little goats. Now, one of the things that I think there's a slide coming up here on this, it's not right now, but it tells you that God allowed a person to either take a little goat or a little lamb in Passover. It didn't have to be a lamb. It could be a goat. They're very, very similar at that early age. But was one lamb for a household, and it says in verse 4, a household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it, according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make their count for the lamb. So you didn't go and leave a whole lot of lamb left over. You try to gauge it to the number of people. Like if you have a big lamb, and we're not going to eat all that lamb. We couldn't even eat one leg of that lamb. Then you would invite your neighbors to come in, and you would eat it together. That was one of the things about this which was unusual. So here we are. And I'll just put this highlighted. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out of the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. Others said it was on day 10, you took the lamb, you kept it close so you could see it, make sure it was healthy, make sure that everything was going on, and also people would get to love it. Like any little creature like that, people would get bonded to that little thing. Well, on the 14th day, you had to kill it. Now, there was once when I was farming that we decided to do that. We bought a lamb. We fed this lamb, and I had 4 daughters at that time, and the daughters were all fell in love with this little lamb. And they did not want me to kill it, but I had to kill it. They'd never learned this lesson if I didn't kill that lamb. Now that's a very hard lesson to learn for young people. You take that little lamb and you would kill it. Why would you kill it? Why don't we eat something else instead of the lamb? God wanted us to see that because of what it was going to show later on, as we will read this morning in the New Testament, about what God talked about when he talked about a lamb. So yeah, you had to kill it in the evening. You couldn't eat it if you didn't kill it. So it had to be done. Now there's a mixture of sheep and goats. And then you can look at the color there, and you can say, well, yeah, those ones that are brown and white, they're all the goats. But they can be mixed up. Depends on the breed of the goat as to whether they're going to be spotted or speckled or whatever. And the same with the sheep in some cases. Now you couldn't just kill the thing and eat it raw. Have you ever tried to eat flesh that's raw? You know, there's nothing about it that is appealing to do that. So you can boil it. You can roast it. I guess you could microwave it. I guess they couldn't do that, but we could do that today. God says, I want it roasted. It had to be roasted. You had to heat it with fire. There had to be a fire underneath it. And you had to eat it with bitter herbs. There was a bitterness about this. What was the bitterness? The bitterness was there were people died because of what God did in that plague. The firstborn of every family died. And if you didn't have the blood over your house, the person who was firstborn in that house would die as well. If you didn't stay in your house, like God says, once you put that blood over, you've got to stay in that house till the angel passes over. If you're outside, you're exposed to the angel. You've got to eat the thing whole. Like we don't eat animals today with the heads attached, normally. But in some cases we do. They would have taken, I think, the insides out. They would have taken the digestive tract out, the stomach out, the colon out, and got rid of that. I believe they did. I can't prove that, but I think they did. They would have left the heart and the liver and the kidneys. So there would have been quite a few things in there, like sometimes you'll buy a chicken and you find out that when you look inside the chicken, there's something that's wrapped up in the chicken that wasn't certainly there when the chicken was alive. That's parts of the chicken. When they took the insides out, they put things that you could eat back in, and you cook it together. Now that's a picture of how they cooked it, something like that. So they put a spear right through the animal that wouldn't burn. So it would have to be metal, or it would have to be wood with metal on it. And then they rolled it over very hot coals. You can see it's wrapped up so it doesn't come apart. And that's taken from what they do today in terms of the Passover. Okay, I think that's where we want to break, and I think even the lamb has just arrived. So we're ready.